Members up here, we're going to get started on the meeting. Um, Public, public safety is still going upstairs. They should be joining us pretty quick down here. Senator Lee Anderson, would you do the invocation? You'll need to go to the next mic. I think that one probably still doesn't work.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day you've given us, dear Lord, and just thank you for all the many blessings that you bestowed upon us. Dear Lord, give us the wisdom and knowledge to do the right, make the right decision for the great people of the great state of Georgia. Again, we want to pause and thank you for loving us. And dear Lord, like again, thank you for your many blessings. Forgive us all our sins in your name's sake. Amen.
All right. We're going to get going with the first time we're going to talk about is data centers. Now, we had testimony the last meeting on data centers, so we're going to be really limited time-wise on what we can do on it again. We've heard several bills on data centers, as a matter of fact. There's a sub in here that is a kind of a combination of things from Senator Orrock, Senator Brass, and we had one other as well we looked at. So the fiscal note for this, we haven't gotten the updated fiscal note, and I can explain later what would probably happen on this under this scenario. All right. To go into the sub here a little bit, what we have, there's Senator Brass with us now. You can come on up here. So one of the things we've seen on these numbers, and we've really had a hard time getting good numbers. I think a conversation for another day is going to be, you know, the Department of Revenue has confidentiality, and when we couldn't get some numbers earlier, they actually weren't providing them to Georgia State FRC because they said the amount is so low that we would lose the confidentiality of those that are getting the credits. So I think that's something we might want to address in the future is if you're getting millions and millions of dollars in credits, do you have confidentiality, because we're unable as legislatures to get the correct numbers, and so now they've blown up on us once they started getting the correct numbers over to FRC. This bill and Ledge Council worked on this, and you can also address questions to him if you want to, or if I'm stating it wrong. But the sub that sort of combines the several, it says that first the section 1 deals with the computer equipment credit, and basically it's saying that you can't double dip in it. You can't take the data center credit and the computer equipment credit. That one is set to sunset December 31st, 2028. Now, the last time this was done in 2022, it was extended 5 years, and the data center credit, over the vote of a number of people here, was extended for 10 years. Or they would have both been sunsetting at that time. So this is saying that you can't double dip and get that credit as well, because if you saw, I think the AJC on the front page Sunday did a fairly accurate job of describing them, and it's about half and half on each one, the way that those close to $3 billion breaks down. So that date on 27 is unchanged from current legislation. That's obviously the will of the committee to look at on the sunset. But the other language up there is that you can't get both at the same time. Would you agree? Am I describing that correctly?
Yes, Chairman. Generally, that's correct.
Okay. Ledge Council says that's pretty much what it says. The second one says on the. Do you have it? You got a copy, didn't you?
I did. You gave me a copy before today.
Okay, great. I was. Says after the effective date of this act, there wouldn't be any new certificates issued, and those that were in effect would continue until January 1st of 2027. So we've seen a bill that stopped them immediately. We've seen a bill that sort of phased them out. This is 2027, so it's going to be up to the committee to look at. So I guess at this point, I would say, are there any questions or any comments from the committee members? Senator Dolezal.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to make sure I understand what we're doing here. The first section that ends at line 23 deals with essentially the computer credit, the purchase of the computers, and says if you're taking the data center credit, you can't use the computer credit.
Correct.
So it essentially would keep the computer credit in place until 2028, but it would then only be limited to those entities that were buying $15 million or more for a purpose other than use in a data center, assuming that, well, conceivably, as long as they weren't taking the tax credit for the actual data center construction.
Yeah.
The second part of what you're doing addresses the data center construction tax credit, the one that was implemented in 2018, and essentially says that we're going to end that at the end of this year.
Correct. And, you know, this is a starting point. If the committee wants some movement either way, we can certainly look at that. And I do want to make sure everybody understands the computer equipment credit. And we say 15 million, but it's actually a little different than that, in that if you buy 15 million worth of equipment, then you only pay 10% of the tax you would have paid on the first 15 million. So instead of it being 7%, you're paying 0.7% on the first 15 million, and then you're paying 7%, or you're exempted from the whole 7%.
The other
on
question I
anything over
had,
15 million.
do you know why in the fiscal note the numbers quadruple between 28 and 29?
Well, you might not have been here for the conversation, but Georgia State Fiscal Research says they could not get numbers from the Department of Revenue due to confidentiality. They're saying that there were so few people getting the credit at the time that they could not do that without giving away the confidentiality. And I think that's the question for us as legislatures. If we're giving away billions of dollars in credits, you know, should we protect them from us knowing that?
What does that mean as it relates to the fiscal note? Does that mean that they have more visibility in 29 because there's not NDAs on a negotiated deal or something?
There's enough people getting the credit that the Department of Revenue, and they can certainly speak to this if they're here and want to, but there's enough people getting the credit that they don't identify anybody in particular by putting the numbers out there. That if one person's getting the credit and you know, you can't really necessarily describe it. If everybody knows there's one data center going up and you give a number out there, then that, they say, their argument is it takes away the confidentiality. I'm all for transparency, but I guess that's for another day. Behind that, there's a little 3-page stapled together. It's just some writing on the first page, which you can read or not. Says, yeah, number 4 at the bottom of the page. I just pulled that out of the full report. So if you look at the data center tax credit, let's take fiscal year 2027, and this is the state part only. The local amount is almost equal to that, a little bit, slightly less than that. It's saying that we're foregoing $761 million in sales tax revenue because of the activity, construction, and those kind of matters. We are taking in $45 million. So we're spending 761 in state revenue to get 45 million in state revenue. So, you know, if you look at it from a return on, in 2027, if you look down there at the 761 million is what it's costing in our revenue. And if you, the other one, the study that I had done on the computer equipment is fairly old. These numbers on here are way outdated because that one's up to 700 million or so now. But again, then it was saying if you take 2027 on that chart, the last page, it was saying that their estimate, this was done back in 2022, was that if we spent 141 million, we were going to get back 5 million for a net loss of 136 million. Now, we found out since then that number is already up to 700 million as well. So to put it in perspective, I think I've said this before, but the two credits together in foregone state revenue amounts to more than a month of total personal income tax in Georgia. We're spending over a month of personal income tax for these two credits. Well, you know, when you look at the diversification of our state economy, it's pretty massive. I think, is that Senator Tillery that's got a question, or?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be a better question for Legislative Council. Make sure I'm reading this correctly. You got a lot of moving pieces, and so I'm in OCGA 48-8-3, and I'm on line 12. I'm going to do 12, 13, and 14, relating to exemptions by revising paragraph 68, repealing paragraph 68.1, adding a new subparagraph, and by adding a new paragraph to read as follows. And then I get to F. That F, does it fall in 68? I think it does, but I need to just make sure.
Yes, Senator Tillery, that subparagraph F applies to paragraph 68,
Okay.
and then you'll see,
That you strike paragraph 68.1 in its entirety.
correct, and it's replaced by what you see beginning at line 28.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity. If you pull up the original code, it's difficult to read it unless you have the original code pulled up beside it. That's what I had.
Sorry, had the wrong one lit up there, so. Did you have a comment?
I
Okay,
did.
Go ahead, Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Chairman Brass for bringing this bill forward. No? Oh, okay. Well, thank you for being involved, however it is.
It's a sort of in between of the several bills that were brought to our committee.
I think what you're bringing up, and just to make an extra point, is with a net loss of $702 million per year, nobody here, I don't think, is an anti-data center. What we are is pro-Georgians, because what we're doing is we're telling everybody else that pays taxes that you're paying for this. Because a net loss of $700 million, that means whoever's going to work every day and having money taken out of their paycheck for the state is paying for someone else. And if you look at the data center companies, which are great companies, whether it be AWS, their Meta, their Google, their Switch, I added up the top 10. And the top 10 make almost $1 trillion in profit. Not revenue, but profit per year. I don't think they need a tax break from Georgia in order to operate their business effectively. So just to put things in context as we're going through these deliberations to make sure we have the facts in front of us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. All right, maybe that's Dolezal again, Senator, go ahead.
I'm just curious, Chairman, kind of on the policy goal here of this, the merging of these bills.
Well-
This would keep the computer credit in place until 28. As a, let me just, I'll let you answer that question first, and then.
Well, we had a study that showed that credit, I mean, I didn't support extending at the time, so if you're asking me, I wished it wasn't in effect right now.
The computer one or the
The-
construction?
Either one.
Okay.
Either one, I didn't support the extension on. They were both in the same bill. That, if I remember right, you voted against it as well, so. But this doesn't change that sunset. That's up to the committee. Do you want to look at an earlier sunset or leaving the sunset at December 31st, 2028? Or, something else different altogether. That's more for the will of the committee, I guess.
The original bill that Chairman Brass brought only dealt with the data center construction credit and did not touch the computer equipment credit.
Correct, and in delving into this, we found out that number had blown up as well, and it's equal to this 700 million on the other credit as well. So together, you're looking at about $1.5 billion between the two of them, and so part of what this was saying is you know, if we don't address this, then they would simply switch from one credit to the other,
On
or
the,
maybe both, I don't know.
what happens if someone purchases equipment sometime in the year 2028
Well,
for a data center?
for a data center, yeah, I think you make a point. I see where you're going with it. That they could, well, no, we're saying it couldn't switch in the other language. So, yeah, for a data center, then it wouldn't be able to be used in this because we've already said if you're eligible for the data center credit. I don't know, I guess need to ledge counsel. It may not cover that. You might be right.
Can we ask?
Yes. Sorry, Senator, could you repeat the question?
Nobody will have a construction credit in 2028 because it will have expired. But you could have existing locations that are doing an equipment repurchase in July of 28. Would they have access to the credit under the current writing of this language?
For data centers with an existing certificate of exemption, yes.
Okay.
Come up here to,
Yeah.
use my mic and
Yeah.
or you can go down there to the witness mic. That's probably better.
Chairman, I guess the question I would have on that, if the policy is to get rid of the double dipping, why not just explicitly restrict data centers as defined in the code from having access to the computer equipment credit altogether, as opposed to tying it to the credit with these overlapping dates and everything else?
Okay. You want to address?
I can address that question. I believe the intention was twofold. It wasn't simply to prevent double dipping, it was to also, as I understand it, to prevent data centers that would have been eligible for the exemption under 68.1 from simply switching over to 68 as soon as that is repealed.
So this language, if the 68.1 is repealed, they won't be able to go over to 68.0 under your language would be your interpretation.
No, they would not.
Okay. Senator Tillery?
Can you show me how? Because, and here's, I think Senator Dolezal and I are kind of running through the same thing, comparing it back to 48.8.3. I know that's not all of 48.8.3 is not on the printout sheet, but just pulling up the code beside it. I would argue that the paragraphs aren't standing repealed till December 31st, 2028. But, so that means 68 is still live, and 68, 48.3, what are we in? 48.8.3, 68. I think still says the sale and lease of computer equipment to be incorporated into a facility or facilities of the state to any high technology company classified under these NAICS codes would still receive that benefit of not having to pay sales tax as long as the purchases or leases were worth more than $15 million. So that's, and I'm reading part A. That we didn't strike that, so right. So that's not on here because it's not getting struck, right? But you got on line 15, we have paragraph F. Notwithstanding other provisions in this paragraph, the exemption provided in some paragraph A, which is that $15 million exemption, shall not apply to the lease or sale of equipment used or deployed.
Which is our current definition of data centers.
Okay.
What you're looking at,
Okay.
yeah.
So in your mind, we're,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think me and you were both talking it out at the same time.
so this would 100% preclude any data center from using the computer exemption that is in A.
Correct.
Okay.
And they would lose the construction credit under lines 28 through 34
Starting January 1
of
of next year.
2027.
Yeah.
Correct.
All right, that's Senator Lee Anderson. You got a question, comment?
Would this pertain to a data center that's already exists, or what about one that's fixing to build if they went on and pre-ordered the equipment?
If they have their certificate of exemption approved by the time this bill takes effect, then they would get it. They would get the sales tax exemption. That was in the original version. I believe it's in this version as well.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Now, yours is working now, they tell me. They've actually fixed it, so we'll try it and see.
You may not want it to work, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, I propose, I don't know what, sorry I'm late, the intentions of this bill, but just to make sure, I do know the intention of this bill, but in terms of next steps, but it may behoove us to maybe work on this a little more and just make sure everybody's clear on kind of what we're putting in front of the committee, make sure it's absolutely perfect, and then move this thing out of here. But that's just my 2 cents.
All right. Any other comments from the committee we've got? All right, well, I think I'm willing to wait on this. Let's see, Senator Harbin. you
Yeah,
wanted to
quick
make-
question. So what I'm understanding this will not affect any data center that is currently under construction or has a certificate,
Oh, it
correct?
absolutely will affect them. The
Okay.
way this is written, the way this is not, this substitute fundamentally changes what my bill did.
Okay,
We passed a bill to repeal this 2 years ago. Made it through the Senate and the House, and the governor vetoed
veto,
it.
yep.
And the reason he vetoed it, because we lured them here with tax incentives, and then we were yanking that away.
Right,
Okay, so the way I wrote my bill was to grandfather those in, say, yes, we lured you here.
understood.
We have a sunset of 2032. We get that. So let's try this again, get it through the Senate and the House, let the governors, hopefully, he'll understand that, okay, now it's fair. But what this bill does is in 2027, it takes my language and then it moves the sunset from 2032 to January 1 of 2027. So I'm scared we're about to repeat the same thing we did last time. And if we want to get something done, I believe my bill could have done that, and you could have added your 68.1 or whatever language you wanted in there, leaving the sunsets alone. But instead, someone is trying to change those sunsets. I think is idiotic, in my opinion.
I think it does this, it addresses an integrity of our state where we brought a business in to and given an agreement to what's going on, and then we're turning around and we're changing that. I understand going forward, making those changes for new data centers or but to go back and yank that away from what we've already told someone, I don't think is really an ethical thing to do with those that we brought in.
I totally agree. The sunset's there. They came in under the risk of that sunset leaving in 2032.
Right.
They knew that risk. They took it. But then we go mid-term and say, all right, we're taking 5 years off of that. To me, is not right.
I would agree with you.
And I think those are fair comments. You know, I don't know if they had different numbers 2 years ago than we did. We had numbers of $100 million, and all of a sudden we're looking at $1.5 billion, and so that's one of the things we're looking at as well. But we will, Senator Dolezal, one comment, and then we'll move.
It's a question for you and maybe Chairman Brass. As I recall the 2024 version of this, the industry was asking for a 6-month window, and I don't want to mischaracterize, I want to make sure I'm accurate. Chairman Brass, I don't know if you recall this or not. The bill that we passed, I believe, would have become effective either upon signature or July 1st of that year. As I recall, the industry lobbying me, they were asking for 6 months. Do you know kind of where either the second floor or the consortium of people that are working on these things in terms of an agreeable window?
I don't think we've got an answer on where that would be, and obviously, whatever we send to the House is going to then be negotiated and looked at,
This
and
ain't gonna
consultation
last.
between the three sides, yeah.
I can tell you that.
Senator Hodges.
One question, was there a fiscal note prepared on Senator Brass's original bill?
There was, and it's in the folder. It should be
Is it the first?
behind it there. Yeah, let me see if it's,
Okay.
I got it. So there wasn't a lot of impact, for a while on it until you start catching up in 2030 and, 2031 in that area.
Well,
Or I guess I would say half an impact in 2029 and then full impact in 2030, yeah. Senator Tillery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Brass, I think on line 32, the January 1, 2027 is the thing you think is different about.
it's absolutely different. I didn't have a date, so we were leaving it at the same sunset.
Which would have been, so if that was changed to December 31, 2031, which is the current bill, you think that mimics your
That is closer to
other proposal?
to the bill, the other proposal. Now, one thing I caught in my original version that I don't expect this committee to take it out, but maybe some common sense folks can do it. But if I think when they go change out their customers, my thought was if they're here, they came on the tax credit, they should get that until the sunset, and then the legislature make a decision. And so I don't think the data center customer piece should be in there either. That wasn't my intent of the original bill, but that did get in there, and I didn't catch it till later on.
You're talking about on line 20.
So my ideal bill would strike on line 29. I would strike or high technology data center customer, because then that language there would allow them when I don't know, let's say it's a Facebook and then their new customers Google, and I'm just making stuff up, but if they switch out their customer, they're gonna have new equipment. Again, that warehouse, if you will, is there, and it came here on the tax credits that we promised them until 2032, and so in my mind, it should stay that way.
I can go with you on the second one, the first one, probably not the second one. And Mr. Chairman,
What's the second one?
the one you talked about, the customers, I think that actually eviscerates your bill, but we'll talk about that later on.
Well, as I stated, I wouldn't expect this committee to go for that.
To eviscerate your bill? We'd never do that to you, Mr. Chairman.
No, y'all never done it to anybody else either.
The date change, I do think, though, would mimic the credit cut that we made in the income tax proposal in Senate Bill 476. So the date change, Mr. Chairman, probably lines up with what we've already passed with the 2031 date. Just for discussion for a later date.
Right, and actually it does on this, but not on the computer equipment. It's a year later. It wasn't that
And
big.
truth is, I mean, if you're gonna move the sunset up, I don't know why you wouldn't mimic it with the other credit. I don't know why those wouldn't be lined up. But again, I use common sense, so I don't
I
expect that
didn't,
here.
I basically had this as a starting point for the committee to talk about, it didn't change the sunset on the, computer equipment, but that's something for the committee to look at, will of the committee. All right, I don't see any other questions. We'll continue to work on this. I think we had a good discussion on it. And we'll all try to come to consensus on this bill. Thank you for coming to the meeting. We're gonna move on to Senator Robertson's bill. Is he here?
Yes, sir, he is.
All right, great.
It's in order to give hotel motel tax to data centers.
Sit down first, so. We don't want the millions watching online to miss your comments, so I wanted to wait till you sat down,
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can proceed, I'm looking at LC 473777. Is that correct?
No, I've got
You have a substitute?
well, I think they're making everybody substitute this year. I ran into that in regulated industries, even though you got the same language.
If somebody has a copy
Yeah,
of the
let's get,
substitute,
we'll
I
get you a
can.
copy of it. I had a bill that was word for word as last year, but they said you can't use that number. It takes a new number, so that may be what we're running into.
It's LC 473971S. S. Mr. Chairman, after what y'all just went through, I think this is going to be fairly simple. All I'm doing here is currently we have a structure for hotel motel tax to be used for tourism within communities. And I represent several communities that have military museums. And some of these military museums you would expect to see on the mall in Washington, D.C. They're incredible, especially the one out near Fort Benning, the National Infantry Museum. Takes our American history back to when this country was founded, which I believe is almost 250 years ago, up until our most recent war on terrorism and other things we're doing. And there's been some confusion by some of the parties whether military museums and other museums qualify to be considered when this money is distributed. And all this does, it does not have an amount or anything. But if you look on the substitute on line 33, what we did is we removed museums and planetariums out of line 33, section N, and we just created section R at line 38. It says museums, including but not limited to military museums or any other institutions dedicated to preserving, exhibiting, and interpreting the history of conflicts and military actions of the United States Armed Forces and its service members through artifacts, documents, and other memorabilia organized for similar purposes. It's just a clarification.
So the museums that were originally in the bill in line 33, you're saying there was confusion around that?
Yes, sir, they were saying that their interpretation of a museum was a T-Rex, and they were not recognizing these military museums, which I know we have some Marines in the Senate. I've been through the Marine Museum at Quantico and the Infantry Museum, and these are full-fledged, incredible buildings that are dedicated to our armed forces, and I think they should have the opportunity. And they draw in many times at Fort Benning. I can tell you thousands and thousands and thousands of people come to Muskogee County every year to visit that museum because of Fort Benning and the Ranger schools and airborne schools there.
Make a motion appropriate time.
I don't see any comments, any questions from the committee members. We'll go ahead and take a motion, Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move we pass this excellent bill, Senate Bill 430, LC 473971S.
Motion second, any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank y'all, appreciate it. Thank y'all for voting on a tax bill.
All right, Senator Rhett, you can do it from there up at the podium, whatever you want to do. We were going to give your bill a hearing today. Okay, 14's lit up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very simple bill. It's not a tax bill. But basically what it does is the legislation would consolidate and allow the tax commissioner or Department of Revenue, to establish rules and regulations determining the cost of living to military retirement pay. Basically, the commissioner may use the Consumer Price Index as reported by the Department of Labor to determine the cost of living adjustments. And basically all they're doing is just consolidating it into one entity, so that way that person can determine whether or not, following the index, if it should reflect how inflation or deflation may affect retirement income. So it's just one person now who's going to make that decision whether they should or not, and they look at different index and make that decision. It doesn't cost the department any more or less, but creates efficiency and support of our veterans.
So when you say one person looking at the decision, who's looking at it now?
Well, what they do is they go to many different entities and ask for their input. But right now, it would just come under tax.
I know we had raised that a while back. I guess what you're saying is that this would automatically increase with the rate of inflation. Is that what?
It just depends. If the Department of Revenue determined that based on the different index that it should be increased, they would. But if they don't think it should be, then they won't increase it.
Well, I don't know that they're the ones that actually make that determination, but okay, Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Redd. I know this comes from your heart and your background in service, so thank you for that. I do have a couple questions. I am concerned of how they, A, would determine that, but B, if you look at what Senator Tillery's bill did in order to eliminate the first $50,000 for an individual and $100,000 for a family and then lower the overall rate, is this not all going to be duplicative anyway?
Well, you never know. Things can change. But basically, we're just having one person make that decision whether or not, because you still have to deal with cost of living. That's basically all they're looking at. Whether or not it should stay where it's at, increase, or decrease.
And I appreciate that. I know this comes from a great place, from your heart. My concern would be is, I believe it would really be incumbent upon the legislature to make that decision based on what we see the numbers versus giving that to someone who is unelected. We'd have to look at that and then decide whether we should change the official code of Georgia to raise that exemption in the code. I'm just not sure that that ties together in something that we would do, because it could set some dangerous precedents for us.
I'm open for suggestions.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions by the committee? So I think we've got a few things on this one to work on as well, so we'll continue to work on it and have some discussions with DOR as well on this, which way we go on this. There is a fiscal note in here in your folder, just so you have that for informational purposes as well. All right, those were the three bills for the committee today. We appreciate everyone coming, and meeting's adjourned.